The afternoon crowd moved like a slow river through the downtown transit station. People carried coffee cups, backpacks, and small talk. Announcements chimed above, flat and familiar. The floor shone from a recent cleaning, and the air smelled, faintly of metal and rain. Mara Khan walked with an easy step, as if she had made this trip every day for years. She wore a gray sweater, dark jeans, and simple sneakers. Her hair was tied back. Her tote bag looked soft and ordinary. Nothing about her asked for attention. Inside, she held a quiet purpose. She had read every report, watched every clip, and repeated every line in her head. She knew the busiest corners of this station and the quiet ones, too. She knew which cameras worked best and which ones showed a blurry view. She knew how the afternoon light fell across the ticket lines. Her eyes moved now, slow and steady, taking in small details. A mother guided a toddler. A student checked a class schedule. A man laughed into his phone. It was a normal day, and that was part of the plan. Near the far gate, an officer stood with a relaxed posture. He greeted riders, nodded at staff, and gave directions to tourists. He had a kind voice. He also had a habit, according to several riders. They said he found things. They said the found items seemed to show up when he wanted them to show up. The stories were calm and plain, the way people speak when they are tired of trouble. A small zip pouch appeared. A person did not know how it got there. A backroom check followed. A long day grew longer. Mara felt the weight of a sealed envelope against the inside of her tote. It was smooth and stiff. The seal mattered. The paper, inside, mattered more. She did not touch it. She only felt its quiet presence and drew strength from it. She reminded herself to breathe in a slow, even way. Her breath was a metronome. In, hold, out. Her hands stayed open and visible. Her steps were measured and calm. She bought a ticket. She moved through the turnstile. The world continued to be very ordinary, which was exactly what she needed. Several floors above, in a small room, screens showed different angles of the station. A team watched. They spoke in short phrases and kept their voices level. They marked the time, the positions, and the flow of people. They did not stare only at the officer. They scanned the scene like careful readers. They looked for context, not drama. The plan was simple, but it depended on patience. It depended on timing. It depended on plain facts captured in a clear way. Mara paused by a map on the wall and pretended to study a route. She let the officer see her. She let him see her again a minute later, in a different corner. She did not force it. She only allowed the normal rhythm of a station to do its work. She stood at a distance that seemed natural. She checked the clock. She checked the platform number. She adjusted her tote strap. Everything looked like any other afternoon, which is what made it useful. The officer glanced in her direction with friendly eyes. He continued to help a couple with a stroller. He pointed to the elevator and smiled. He said a kind word to a janitor. His manner was a warm blanket. People like warm blankets on cold days. He took a few steps toward the map. Mara did not step away. She shifted her weight and made room as any considerate person would. He thanked her and traced a line on the map with his finger. "Rush hour. Gets tricky here," he said in an easy tone. "Lots of folks lose stuff when they hurry." She nodded, polite and calm. "That makes sense," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. She did not offer more words than needed. He looked at her tote and at the floor near the base of the map. "We just had a found item," he said, light and helpful. "People keep dropping these pouches. You know how it is." He held up a small zip pouch for a second, casual and brief. It looked like something a rider might use for coins or earphones. It looked harmless. Harmless things are often trusted. The station hum covered small sounds, but not all sounds. A camera near the ceiling watched this part of the scene. Another camera caught the officer's hands. The officer made an easy motion, like he was moving the pouch from one hand to another. He brushed the pouch near the open top of Mara's tote. Then he pointed, as if pointing out an everyday detail. "Is this yours?" he asked. The words rode on that same warm blanket of voice. They sounded routine. Routine can be powerful. Mara's heart beat once, hard and clear. She let her face stay calm. She looked down at her tote. She did not rush. She did not reach. She said, "I do not think so." The officer gave a small chuckle, as if to say this kind of mix-up happened all the time. "Let's keep everyone safe," he said. "We'll take a quick look in a private room." A junior guard, new to the job, looked to the officer for cues. The guard nodded, unsure but willing to follow. Mara took a slow breath and said, "I would like a supervisor present." Her words were polite. Her tone was neutral. The officer smiled and said, "Of course. Right this way." The hallway to the side room was narrow and quiet. The sounds of the station faded behind them like a door closing on a busy street. The junior guard walked ahead and held the door open. The room was plain: a table, 2 chairs, a clock, and a small cabinet. A laminated sheet on the wall showed station policies. The air felt slightly cooler. The officer waved toward the chair. "This will be quick," he said. "You'll be on your way in a minute?" Mara looked at the clock and then at the laminated sheet. She noticed 2 missing lines on the posted policy. She noticed a small camera dome in the corner. She noticed her hands, open on the table, steady. When people are sure of their routines, they grow easy with them. The officer's ease had a shape. He took a pen from his pocket and set it down with a soft tap. He stood in a way that placed his shoulder between Mara and the door, but not in a heavy way. The junior guard hovered, trying to look useful. Everything felt normal to people who did not know the plan. But to Mara, each part of the scene was a small bead on a string. Each bead had a place. Each bead had a reason. She asked for water. The junior guard stepped out to get it. The door eased shut. The officer cleared his throat and began a friendly script about safety and lost property. The words touched on community, care, and caution. They were the kind of words that made people lower their guard. Mara listened as if she were a commuter who wanted to get home. She let a tiny crease appear between her eyebrows, a sign of mild concern. She let her gaze rest on the table, not on the pouch. She kept her breath slow. The envelope inside her tote pressed lightly against the fabric. It was a simple object with a strong meaning. Its seal was unbroken. It waited like a held note in a choir, quiet but present. She knew when to open it. Not before. Not after. Trust the plan, she told herself. Trust the timing. Trust the care that brought you to this moment. Above them, the team watched the door and the small camera feed from the room. They did not speak much now. They took notes. They marked the second when the pouch came into view. They marked the words about safety. They marked the moment the junior guard left for water and the door closed. They did not rush to celebrate. They did not rush at all. They let the scene unfold in the clear light of ordinary time. The junior guard returned with a paper cup and a new layer of nerves. He set the water down and glanced at the officer. The officer gave him a small nod, like a coach telling a player to relax. Then he turned to Mara. "May I take a quick look in your bag?" he asked. "Just to confirm, this pouch is not yours." His tone was courteous. The question sounded simple. The laminated policy on the wall said a supervisor should be present for certain checks. The supervisor was not here yet. Mara said, "I am happy to wait for a supervisor." She took a sip of water. She adjusted the tote so the envelope lay flat. She did not lift it. She did not reach inside. She looked at the clock again, as any person might when they worry about missing a train. Her eyes went back to the door. She asked, "Will the supervisor be here soon?" The junior guard answered too quickly. Yes, yes, they're on the way. His voice held a tremble of effort. The officer gave another one of those easy smiles. We can save time, he said. A quick look, then you go. I don't want you to miss your train. He spoke as if he were doing her a favor. A favor is a soft glove. A favor can hide pressure. Mara placed both hands flat on the table again. The light fell on her fingers in a clean line. She said nothing for a moment, then she said, I choose to wait for a supervisor. Behind the glass and screens upstairs, someone marked the exact words. The plan needed clear words. Clear words were like clean photographs. They left little room for confusion. The team kept their breathing steady too. They watched the door. They watched the clock. They watched the officer's posture and the path of his hands. The officer leaned back, still calm. He tapped the pen again. He looked at the junior guard. Please get the supervisor, he said in a tone that could be read two ways, helpful or slightly annoyed. The junior guard left again with visible relief, grateful for a simple instruction. The room grew quiet. The clock ticked. Footsteps in the hall rose and fell. Mara took another sip of water. She let the quiet settle. Quiet can be a bridge to the next moment. She thought about the people who had filed those earlier reports. She imagined small details of their days, a worker who missed a shift, a student who had to call a parent, an elder who found the process confusing and tiring. These were not headlines. They were lives on ordinary days, not judge anyone I buy. The supervisor stepped into the room with a steady pace and a calm face. He greeted everyone and placed a thin folder on the table as if to anchor the space. His badge shone in the soft light. The junior guard stood a little taller now, relieved to have clear guidance. The officer leaned back and folded his arms lightly, a picture of easy confidence. The room felt balanced again, like a picture frame set straight on a wall. Tell me what brought us here, the supervisor said in a measured tone. The officer gave a brief summary. He spoke about a small pouch, about how writers often dropped small things when they hurried, and about how a quick look could clear up confusion. He smiled in a friendly way as he talked, as if this were only a helpful favor to a traveler on a tight schedule. Mara listened with an attentive, open expression. She kept her hands on the table where everyone could see them. When the officer finished, she spoke in a clear, even voice. I am happy to cooperate within the station policy, she said. I would like to follow the steps on that sheet. She nodded to the laminated policy on the wall. The supervisor turned to read. The policy allowed line by line. His voice was neutral and careful. For a bag check, he read, a supervisor should be present. The writer must provide consent or there must be a specific reason documented. He looked back at Mara. Do you consent to a bag check? Mara shook her head slightly. I prefer to wait until I understand why it is needed, she said. I do not believe the pouch is mine. The officer offered a gentle laugh, like a person smoothing a wrinkle from a shirt. We can make this easy, he said. Just a quick look, then you're on your way. The supervisor did not move from the policy sheet. He did not raise. His voice. He spoke the way good instructions sound, plain, light, and complete. We will respect your preference, he told Mara. We can document what has happened so far. He turned to the junior guard. Please start a log. Note the time, the location, and the presence of all parties. The junior guard took out a small notepad, wrote the time, and read the names on the badges aloud, checking spelling. He wrote down small pouch and drew a box to label it later. His handwriting was neat and careful, the kind of script that comes from someone who wants to get things right. Mara placed her cup of water to one side and adjusted the tote so it rested flat on the table. She said, I would like to note that the pouch was mentioned in the public area by the map. She spoke slowly, keeping her words simple and specific. I did not pick it up. I did not place it in my bag. I do not claim it. The supervisor nodded. Your statement is noted, he said. There was a small camera dome in the upper corner of the room. It blinked every few seconds. The supervisor radioed upstairs for the control desk. He asked them to confirm whether the hallway and map area had clear coverage for the last 10 minutes. A thin voice came back over the radio. Yes, we have. Angles on both. We are marking the time now. The officer glanced at the camera. His expression did not change much, but he shifted his stance by an inch, then 2, as if adjusting for a new picture frame. Cameras are helpful, he said lightly. They can clear up misunderstandings. The junior guard looked from face to face, unsure where to rest his eyes. He settled on the notepad and kept writing. The room held a kind quiet, the sort that makes words land cleanly. Outside, an announcement floated in, saying a train would arrive in 3 minutes. The vent hummed at a steady beat, like a soft drum far away. Where is the pouch now? The supervisor asked. The officer gestured toward the table's edge, where the small zip pouch sat, neat as a folded napkin. Its fabric caught the light. It looked harmless, like something bought at a corner shop. Right there, the officer said. He did not touch it. The supervisor put on thin gloves from the cabinet and looked at the pouch without moving it. We will treat it as a found item, he said. He asked the junior guard to bring an evidence sleeve and a tag. The guard did so quickly, grateful, for a task with clear steps. Together, they slid the pouch into the sleeve and sealed it with a numbered sticker. The supervisor read the number aloud, and the guard wrote it in the log. Thank you, Mara said. Her tone carried a quiet note of relief. She watched the steps with the same care you might watch a baker measure flour. Small actions that make a recipe come out right. The officer leaned forward slightly, arms still folded, smile still easy. We do this all the time, he said. It keeps the station running smoothly. The supervisor nodded. Routine can be good, he replied. It can also hide small mistakes. Our job is to be clear. He placed the sealed pouch on the table near the wall and drew a small box around it in the log with his finger. From this moment, please note that the pouch remains sealed, within sight of all present. The guard made the note. The clock ticked. Another announcement rose and fell. The minute hand moved one notch forward. May I ask a question? Mara said. Of course, the supervisor answered. Is there audio from the map area camera? She said. If not, is there a staff member who could give a statement about the timing? Her voice was calm, gentle. She asked like someone who respects a process and wants it to be whole. We have partial audio, the radio voice replied from upstairs. And we have a cashier who saw the interaction near the map. Please record that, the supervisor said. He looked at Mara and added, We will request both. The officer's smile did not leave, but it thinned a little, like a line drawn with less ink. I remember it clearly, he said. I held the pouch up, asked if it was hers, and suggested a quick check. I appreciate your memory, the supervisor said. We will gather the camera angles, too. Mara kept breathing slow and even. She had learned a long time ago that steady breath keeps the mind steady. She thought of the riders who had filed earlier reports. She pictured them as real people with real errands, a worker rushing to a shift, a student with a heavy backpack, a traveler trying not to miss a bus. She felt a small, warm resolve in her chest, not loud, not sharp, just steady. The junior guard looked at the policy sheet again. He read the line about consent. He read the line about a specific reason. He looked at Mara. He looked at the pouch. He seemed to understand, in a quiet way, that careful steps were not just words on a wall. They were a shape to stand inside. Is there any reason we need to continue here? The supervisor asked the officer. Or can we document and let the rider continue to her train? We can follow up after we review the footage. The officer took a beat before he answered. I prefer to complete the check, he said. It saves time later. We don't want the wrong items leaving the room. The supervisor let the silence sit for a moment. He turned to Mara. You are not required to consent, he said. You have said you do not consent. We have secured the pouch as a found item. We have requested footage and a witness statement. There is no urgent safety reason here. Mara gave a small nod. Thank you, she said. The officer offered another idea, gentle and smooth. Sometimes riders forget what they own, he said. We could just ask what is in the bag. No need to look. A quick inventory by words. Mara kept her voice friendly. I understand, she said. But I prefer to keep my personal items private. If you need an inventory, we can call someone who is not part of this station and can advise me. It was a simple sentence that made a simple point. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. She did not accuse. The supervisor's radio crackled again. Control here. We have a clear angle on the officer's hands near the map, the voice said. We are exporting the clip. The cashier is available to give a statement. Do you want them to come down? Yes, the supervisor said. Please ask them to come to the door and wait. We will keep the room calm. The officer's eyes flicked to the door. He tapped a finger on his sleeve once, then stopped. He kept his smile, but it was now a quiet line instead of a broad curve. The junior guard wrote more notes. He included the words clear camera angle and cashier to give a statement. He drew a small arrow to the time and a star by the pouch number. His pen made a soft scratching sound across the paper, a steady rhythm that felt like progress. Mara reached into her tote and took out a small notebook. She wrote the time, too. She wrote a sentence about the policy. She wrote a sentence about the pouch being sealed. Her handwriting was tidy, each letter like a small, careful step on a path. She did not write many words. She wrote only what mattered. Thank you for your patience, the supervisor said to Mara. I know you have a train to catch. We will give you a summary of what we logged so far. If we need anything else, we will contact you with a formal request. I appreciate that, she said. I am ready to share a document that may help keep things clear. Her voice was still calm. Her eyes were steady. She placed the notebook back in the tote and kept her hand there for a moment, resting on the sealed envelope she had carried all day. There was another soft knock at the door. A staff member appeared holding a short form with blank spaces for a statement. The supervisor thanked them and asked them to wait outside for a minute. Then he looked around the room, one person at a time, as if to make sure everyone felt seen. We will stay with the facts, he said. We will move at the speed of clarity, not the speed of hurry. The officer nodded and said, Of course. His tone was still kind, but the edges of it had lost their shine. The junior guard kept to the envelope rested on the table like a small, quiet anchor. The room did not change, yet something inside it felt different, as if the air had learned a new word. The supervisor watched with steady eyes. The junior guard's pen paused mid-scratch. The officer kept his gentle smile, but it no longer reached all the way to his eyes. Outside, a train pulled in and exhaled a sigh of doors and people. Inside, time drew a careful line through the moment. This moment did not begin here. It began months ago with small stories told in tired voices. A rider who worked nights said a found item had appeared near her bag and turned her long day into a longer one. A student said a pouch she had never seen before was pointed out as if it were hers. A visitor said he felt confused and agreed to a check, then missed his bus. Each story was simple and low, like a light that hums but does not shine. At a small community room near the station, two advocates listened. They asked the same questions each time. Where were you standing? Who was nearby? Did anyone else see it? What did the staff say? The advocates wrote notes on a big pad. They circled words that kept repeating: the map on the wall, a friendly voice, a pouch that looked ordinary, a request for a quick check. They drew lines between dates and shifts. The lines made a shape. One advocate called a public attorney she knew. The attorney had heard small echoes of the same shape in different cases: short detours, lost hours, quiet frustration. The attorney wrote a careful letter to Internal Affairs. The letter did not shout. It asked for a review, listed dates, and offered to connect the writers to investigators. It requested a calm, thorough check. Nothing more, nothing less. Internal Affairs opened a case. They looked at station logs, camera angles, and schedule patterns. They noted which staff were on duty on the days of the reports. The pattern did not prove anything by itself, but it raised a real question. The question was enough to call in a partner. A federal office that handles public integrity cases agreed to join. The idea was simple: confirm the facts in a careful way and do it without putting anyone at risk. In a quiet conference room, a joint team made a plan. They set 3 rules. First, no guesswork, only clear, recorded steps. Second, no rush, move at the speed of facts. Third, no drama, keep the station calm and safe. They chose a day with good camera coverage and a time when the station was busy enough to feel normal, but not so crowded that people might be pushed or flustered. They assigned roles like pieces on a board, each with a small job that fit the whole. They asked Mara to help because she had a steady way with tense rooms. She trained for weeks with the team. She practiced saying simple lines in a simple voice. She stood in front of a mirror and repeated, "I prefer to wait for a supervisor." She learned to keep her hands visible, to breathe in a slow, even way, to ask for a log, to notice small details without staring at them. She did not practice being brave, she practiced being clear. The legal steps moved forward in their own careful rhythm. Investigators gathered sworn statements from riders and staff. They prepared a summary of the pattern: times, locations, camera angles, and words spoken. They went to a federal judge with an affidavit that explained the plan. They did not ask to act on a hunch. They asked to be ready if the pattern appeared again, with live observation, recorded words, and a neutral witness. The judge read, asked questions, and set clear limits. The judge signed a sealed federal arrest warrant. Sealed meant it would stay quiet until the moment it needed to speak. The warrant did not rush anything. It waited for a simple condition. If the pattern repeated under clean observation and met the legal standard, the team could move in a calm, safe way. The warrant named a person. It sat in an envelope with a date, a signature, and a short, serious line that began with that name. Back at the station, the plan had many small parts that fit together like neat bricks. An upstairs control desk watched several camera angles. A cashier on the main floor kept an ordinary day but agreed to speak if needed. A supervisor stayed nearby, ready to read the policy out loud line by line. A junior guard, new to the job, would write a clear log. 2 plainclothes agents stood out of sight in a hallway, waiting for a quiet signal over the radio. None of them needed to be loud. All of them needed to be clear. On the day you already know, the small parts did their work. Cameras caught the officer's hands near the map. A simple voice upstairs called down with the words, "We have a clear angle." The supervisor put on gloves and sealed the pouch with a numbered sticker. The log recorded each step. The cashier confirmed seeing the moment near the map. The junior guard wrote it down with neat care. The station did not stop. People came and went. The world stayed ordinary, which is a good condition for truth. The legal standard they had agreed on was simple in plain speech: clear observations that fit the pattern, captured from more than one view, with a witness. The team marked each element as it arrived. They checked their list the way a pilot checks a pre-flight sheet. 1, 2, 3. They did not skip a box. They did not fill a box with wishes, they filled it with facts. Upstairs, an agent called the federal office to report that the threshold had been met. The call was short. The answer came back steady. Proceed by the plan. The plan did not say hurry. It said now, but still calm. It said, inform the supervisor. It said, bring the room to a safe center. It said, protect the chain of custody. It said, speak plainly. Mara remembered the people whose small stories began this path. She pictured the night shift worker finally getting home on time. She pictured the student sitting for an exam without a knot in the stomach. She pictured the traveler making the bus with space for a deep breath. These were the quiet reasons for all the careful steps. The reasons were not abstract. They were real faces and tired hands and long days that deserved to be shorter. She also remembered the training. There had been a day when the coach dimmed the lights and played a clip of a corridor just like this one. The coach paused the video and asked, "Where is the policy on the wall?" Everyone pointed. "Where is the exit?" Everyone pointed. "Where are your hands?" Everyone lifted them into the light. "Where is your voice?" the coach asked. Last. "Right here," Mara had said, and touched her throat. Plain and calm. The envelope in her tote was the final step in that training. It held two things, the original sealed warrant and a photocopy to read aloud. The photocopy was there so that the original could stay unmarked and clean for the record. The envelope also held a single page of instructions on how to proceed with care. Identify, confirm, inform, and step aside for the executing agents. It was a small stack of paper for a large step in a person's life, which is why the plan treated it with such respect. The supervisor stood very still now, as if stillness could help everyone feel the floor under their feet. The junior guard looked at the pouch and then at the log again, as if to promise himself he would always write this carefully. The officer watched the envelope with a face that wanted to look curious and helpful. That was the face the public knew. It was a face that had done a lot of work in this room. Before this day, the team had walked the hallway many times without anyone noticing. They had measured the space between the table and the door. They had tested the radio in the far corner. They had found the sweet spot where the camera could see the table without glare. They had practiced stepping in and stepping out without, breaking the room's calm. Rehearsal is a quiet kind of care. It keeps a real day from wobbling. In the community room, the advocates had set aside a folder labeled Updates. Inside, there were blank pages waiting to hold good news, or at least clear news. They had told the writers, "We cannot promise an outcome, but we can promise patience and a fair process." Promises like that do not sparkle. They keep their shape by being kept. Today's steps would begin to fill those pages with real lines and real dates. Down in the room, the envelope sat between the people like a modest book in a small library. Mara placed 2 fingers lightly on the edge, not to claim it, but to steady it. She breathed in once more and felt the air move in and out as simply as a door opening and closing. She remembered how the judge's signature looked, not fancy, but firm. She remembered the first line of the warrant and the respectful way she would read it. The radio clicked in the supervisor's hand, a tiny sound like a pin on a map. A soft voice said, "Positions ready." The supervisor did not move his eyes from the table. "Copy," he said. The word was small and even. It meant, "We heard you. We will keep it calm. We will do this with care." Mara's thoughts settled into a single path. Identify. Confirm. Inform. Step aside. Let the next part of the plan unfold in the same clear way the first parts had done. No leaps, no gaps, no heavy words, only the steady steps that protect everyone, including the person whose name is on the paper. She lifted the envelope just enough to slide a finger under the flap. The paper made a soft sound. the kind that reminds you that much of life's weight is carried by small, quiet things. The seal was still intact, neat and complete. She had waited until the threshold was truly met. She had waited until the room held the right people. She had waited until the log had the right lines. Now the plan asked her to take the next step. The officer opened his mouth as if to offer another friendly shortcut. He closed it again. The junior guard stood very still. The seal opened with a soft tear, like a page turning in a quiet library. Mara slid the flap back and removed a thin stack of papers. The room seemed to hold its breath, but nothing rushed. The supervisor stood steady. The junior guard watched, with careful eyes. The officer kept a polite face, though a small line formed near his mouth, the kind that shows when a person presses their lips together. Mara placed the original document to one side and lifted the photocopy so the text could be read without bending the first page. She spoke in a clear, even voice that carried to every corner of the small room. She said her name and role for the record. Then she read the first line, which included the officer's full name, the issuing court, and the nature of the warrant. The words were simple and official. They were the kind of words that do not need emotion to be strong. The officer's eyes moved from the paper to the supervisor and back again. His smile thinned but did not disappear. He stood a little straighter. The junior guard did not move his pen. He did not want to miss a single detail in the log. The supervisor nodded once when Mara finished the first paragraph, a small signal that said, "Continue." Mara read the sections that mattered for this moment. She did not read the entire document. She read only the parts about identification, timing, and procedure. She stated that the warrant was sealed until execution, and that it was now being presented in the presence of a supervisor and 2 staff members, with camera coverage in place. She said the page number, the date, and the judge's signature line. Her tone never changed pace. It stayed calm, like a clear bell that rings the same note each time. When she finished, she set the photocopy on the table where the camera could see it and handed the original to the supervisor for a quick visual check. He did not touch it with bare hands. He used thin gloves and looked for the seal, the date, and the signature. He read the officer's name and looked up. He confirmed what he saw. Then he placed the original back into the envelope and set it in a clean spot on the table, away from the sealed pouch. "Thank you," Mara said. She turned slightly toward the door and spoke into the air in a level voice. "Proceed." The word was simple, and it carried a plan behind it. The door opened with a quiet click. 2 plainclothes agents entered, not in a rush, not with loud voices. They wore simple jackets and held small notebooks. They greeted the room, identified themselves, and confirmed the officer's name with a gentle, steady tone. They explained in the same clear words the next steps. The officer listened. He nodded slowly, like a person trying to keep up with a script they had not expected to hear. "Sir," one agent said in a respectful way, "for everyone's clarity, we are going to move step by step." The agent asked the officer to place his hands where everyone could see them. This was not a demand in a sharp voice. It was a careful instruction given in a bright room with a supervisor present and a camera watching. The officer did so. The junior guard wrote, "Hands visible." Instruction followed, tone calm. The second agent described the process that would follow. The words were familiar to anyone who has worked around procedures. Confirm identity, check for items that must be secured for safety, keep the record clean, and maintain a clear chain of custody for anything collected. The supervisor added that the station would cooperate fully and that the room would remain calm and orderly. He looked at the junior guard and said, "Please keep logging each step." The junior guard wrote the time again, the new names, and a short line. "Agents arrived. Warrant presented. Confirmation complete." Mara stepped back half a pace to give the agents clean space to work. She placed her hands lightly on the chair back, then let them rest at her sides. Her job now was to watch for clarity and support the record. She checked the camera dome in the corner and the position of the pouch. She checked the envelope. Everything was where it needed to be. The agent nearest the officer spoke again. "You have the right to remain silent," he said, steady and clear. He continued with the standard notice of rights, patient and respectful, not rushing through the lines. He asked if the officer understood. The officer said that he did. He asked if the officer wished to speak now or wait for a representative. The officer asked to contact a representative. The agent said that request would be respected at the appropriate stage and that the first steps would be brief and careful. The supervisor nodded as if to say that the station would provide a quiet place for any call later once the agents completed their on-site process. He added, "We will also document the time of any request to contact counsel or a representative." The junior guard wrote, "Officer requested representative. Note time." The agents explained that certain items would be removed and secured for safety and record-keeping. They named them in neutral terms as standard equipment and asked the officer to indicate where they were on his uniform so there would be no confusion. The officer complied. The items were removed one by one with slow, clear motions and placed in a labeled tray. Each item was noted with a number, and the junior guard wrote those numbers in the log. The supervisor watched each step with careful attention, the way a librarian watches a rare book, close but without fuss. Outside, the station continued to breathe. Footsteps came and went. An announcement spoke of a train arriving late. The air in the small room felt steady, like a glass of water that is set down and does not spill. The cashier, who had seen the moment near the map, stood just outside the door with a staff lead. They waited without peeking in, ready to give a calm statement when called. One agent asked the supervisor to confirm once more that the small pouch had been sealed and logged. The supervisor said yes and read the number on the evidence seal out, loud. The agent repeated it and wrote it in his notebook. Then he asked, "Has anyone handled the pouch after it was sealed?" The supervisor answered, "No." The junior guard nodded and pointed to the log line that said the same. The agent said, "Thank you." Next, the agent stated that the officer would be escorted to a vehicle in a quiet way, using a side hallway to avoid disturbing riders. There would be no public announcement. The supervisor said the path was clear and that he had already informed security to keep the corridor open for a few minutes. The junior guard wrote, "Side corridor cleared. No disturbance to riders." The officer looked at the photocopy of the warrant on the table. He kept his expression even. He said he understood the steps. He asked, in a steady voice, if he could speak with the supervisor privately for one moment. The supervisor looked to the agents, who shook their heads kindly and said, "We need to complete this part first. You can make appropriate calls soon in a quiet space. Thank you for your patience." The words were gentle. They carried respect without changing the plan. The agent closest to the door spoke into a small radio. "Moving in 1 minute," he said softly. The words felt like a clock setting itself. He asked the officer if there was anything uncomfortable or unclear. The officer said no. The agent explained how they would walk, who would go first, who would walk beside the officer, and where they would pause to confirm each door was clear. He explained that there would be no raised voices and no public display. He explained that the officer would be allowed to bring basic personal items like a wallet, which would be logged and returned according to policy. Calm words, careful steps. Mara looked at the junior guard and saw a quiet change in his face. It was a thoughtful look, the sort that appears when a person understands why rules exist. He straightened his shoulders, checked his spelling in the log, and underlined the words. Tone calm and no disturbance. He would carry this day into many other days. The supervisor asked if the cashier could give the statement now or if it should wait. The agent said, "Now is fine." The door opened and the staff lead guided the cashier in. The cashier spoke. in a clear voice about the moment near the map, where the people stood, what was said, and how long it took. He did not add any color. He did not guess. He spoke like someone reading a clock. The junior guard wrote down short lines and times. The agent thanked the cashier and told him he could return to his station. "We appreciate your care today," the agent said, and meant it. Before moving, the agents returned to the warrant. One read the full name again. Another confirmed the badge number with the supervisor, who checked a roster sheet. They asked the officer to state his full name for the record, and he did so. They said they were going to proceed. The supervisor stepped to the side to give them clear space. Mara moved her chair back so the path to the door was smooth and open. The small room gathered itself. The envelope lay on the table, the seal open but the edges neat. The sealed pouch sat near the wall, quiet and labeled. The log sat in the junior guard's hands, lines filling the page in careful script. The camera watched from the corner. It did not blink faster. It did not blink slower. It kept its rhythm. The agent stood on either side of the officer, not touching him, just close enough to guide the steps. "We will walk now," one said. "We will stop at the first door and then continue." The officer nodded. He took a small breath. He glanced once at the photocopy. He looked at the supervisor and then at Mara. Both of them gave calm faces back. There was nothing to win in this room. There was only a plan to respect. They moved together toward the door. The junior guard step. Evening light slid across the station floor as Mara stepped back into the main hall. The crowd moved as it always did, steady, varied, full of small plans and small worries. People checked the time, waved at friends, and hurried toward trains. The day looked normal again, which was a good sign. Normal meant the plan had been careful. Normal meant no one had been scared or pushed. Normal meant the record could do its work without noise. The supervisor joined her near the map. They stood a moment, not speaking, letting the simple hum of the station settle the last of their nerves. The junior guard walked up with a short summary on a single page. His handwriting was clear, each line neat and calm. He read the details out loud so everyone would share the same facts. The time the pouch was sealed, the number of the evidence sticker, the names and roles of people in the room, and the moment the transfer was complete. He placed a small square, stamp at the bottom. The stamp left a clean mark that said the page belonged to the day and the day belonged to the log. "Thank you," Mara said. She took the page and folded it once, carefully. She slipped it into her notebook and closed the cover. The notebook was light but felt important, like a promise kept. The cashier waved from a distance. He returned to his window and helped a traveler with directions. He moved a bit slower than before, thoughtful, as if he now saw the station's routine with new eyes. The junior guard looked toward him and then back at the supervisor. He seemed to understand that every person who works a shift carries a small piece of public trust. He stood taller, not with pride, but with purpose. Mara walked toward the exit. The air outside felt different from the cool air of the side room. It was warm with the smell of late-day street life. Food carts, bus exhaust, a hint of rain. She took a slow breath and let it go. A small message buzzed on her phone. It was from the upstairs team. "Well done. Debrief at 19 hours." She replied with a simple, "Copy. Thank you." In an office not far away, Internal Affairs began a careful review. They opened folders with dates and names. They requested recordings from the station cameras and collected logs from other days. They did not assume. They checked. They looked for repeat patterns and clear times. They asked riders if they wanted to make formal statements. They asked gently if anyone needed help with missed shifts or other practical problems caused by earlier incidents. Some riders said no and thanked them for asking. Some said yes. The office wrote those names on a separate list labeled support, because facts are not the only things a fair process must hold. At the same time, prosecutors prepared their next steps. They looked at the sealed pouch now in a secure room, still marked with the same evidence number. They reviewed the recordings. They listened to the words spoken near the map, inside the side room, and during the careful instructions. They cross-checked the staff roles, the times, and the policy lines. The law does not hurry, but it does move forward. They moved forward in a plain, steady way. Back at the station, the supervisor gathered the staff for a short, calm meeting during a quiet hour. He stood with the policy sheet in his hand and read it out loud again, the way he had in the side room. He did not scold. He did not praise. He spoke about steps and reasons. He spoke about how clarity protects everyone, riders, staff, and the public trust that holds a station together. He asked the junior guard to share his log. The guard read his lines, simple and clean. The staff nodded. Words like clear and calm begin to live when people use them in real rooms. They discussed improvements, too. They agreed to add a simple sign near the map. If you are asked to go to a private room, you may request a supervisor and a written log. The words were not meant to scare anyone. They were meant to guide. They updated the rule that a supervisor must arrive before any bag discussion begins, not during. They decided to do quick checks of camera visibility at the start of each shift, so everyone would know which angles worked best that day. The cashier suggested a small bell at the main desk, not to ring for trouble, but to let staff know when a found item would be logged in public view. A bell is a small thing. A small thing can carry good habits forward. The supervisor smiled at the idea and said they would try it for a month. In the community room, the advocates opened their updates folder. They wrote the date and a short line. Plan executed safely. Review underway. Riders will be contacted. They placed copies of a simple guide on the table. If something happens at the station, steps you can take. The guide had calm language, not legal-sounding terms. It said, ask for a supervisor, ask for a log, ask to have the policy read out loud. It said, you can take a breath. You can ask the time. It said, you matter. People picked up the guide and nodded. Sometimes change is a long road made of short sentences. Mara reached the federal office in time for the debrief. The team gathered in a modest room with soft lights and a big whiteboard. They sat in a circle, not at a long table. The lead investigator opened with thanks. Not the loud kind, the real kind. He asked each person to say one thing that worked and one thing to make better. The upstairs camera team said the timing was good. The light near the map was strong. The side room camera, however, had a small glare at certain angles. They suggested a filter on the dome. Someone wrote filter on the board. The plainclothes agent said the corridor path was smooth and quiet. They suggested placing a small sign on the far door during similar steps next time, so staff would not open it by accident. The supervisor, who joined by phone, suggested adding a second policy sheet in the side room, placed lower on the wall so both seated and standing people could read it easily. The junior guard, invited to speak, said he would practice saying, I am logging this step now, out loud, so everyone in the room would know the record was active. The room liked that idea. Small sentences can be steady ladders in tense moments. When it was Mara's turn, she said the calm tone in the room helped the most. People rise to the level of the room's air, she said. If the air is steady, the steps are steady. She suggested one more thing, a short thank you card for the cashier signed by the team. Not a big deal. Just a note that says, your clear words helped. The lead investigator nodded. Kindness is part of good process, too. After the debrief, Mara walked outside. The sky had turned from gold to soft blue, the kind of blue that makes city lights look gentle. She stood on the sidewalk and watched people pass by. A mother and son shared a pastry and laughed at a joke. A cyclist rang a bell and smiled at a friend. A bus pulled up and released warm air and soft voices. The world kept moving in its ordinary way. That ordinary world was the point of all the careful steps to protect it. The next morning, the station rolled out the new sign. It was clear, simple, and friendly. A staffer tested the new bell at the desk. Ding. It made a small, bright sound. They laughed a little and promised not to ring it too often. The junior guard started his shift by walking to the policy sheets. He read both. He straightened the edges and checked the tape. He reminded himself to speak slowly if anything unusual came up. He placed a fresh notepad in his pocket and a spare pen. He felt ready, and not because of any thrill, but because he knew what ready meant now. The cashier came in and found a small envelope at his station. Inside, there was a simple card. It said, "Thank you for your careful words." It had 3 signatures and a short note from the supervisor. "You set a good example yesterday. Keep going." He did not show the card to many people. He just placed it in his drawer and felt a small, honest warmth in his chest. Internal Affairs continued their work for many days. They did not rush. They made a clean timeline. They checked earlier logs from other dates and spoke to people who wanted to be heard. When they found small gaps in station routines, they flagged them. When they saw good habits, they wrote them down as examples. They built a picture that was not about one person alone, but about how a place can protect itself with good steps. In training classes later that month, instructors used the station day as a model. They did not make it dramatic. They did not show it to scare new staff. They used it to show the force of calm, the value of a log, and the strength of a policy read aloud in a steady voice. They told new hires to stand in the room during practice and feel the difference when someone says, "We will move at the speed of clarity." They watched faces relax when those words landed. Some riders heard about the changes and felt a bit safer, not because someone promised them a perfect world, but because someone showed them a careful one. They noticed the sign near the map and the way staff waited for a supervisor without being asked. They noticed how found items were tagged in public view with a bell that made a soft sound. They noticed that small things had been set in the right places, and those small things changed the shape of a day. As for Mara, she filed her notes, returned the original warrant to its secure folder, and wrote a short message to the advocates. "Thank you for your patience. The process respected everyone involved. We will share public updates when allowed." The advocates read the line and smiled. They did not plan a big event. They kept the community room open late for one evening so people could stop by, ask questions, and pick up the small guide in their own language. Quiet work wins trust the way a river shapes stone, slowly, gently, surely. Weeks passed.